I want to welcome everyone who made themselves for this event on a short notice. We are very grateful for all of you. I think we have an anniversary that is sad to many people, but we have to bring it to life so that we always learn the lessons. We always become vigilant that this should not happen to anyone in the world. It is no doubt sad memories, but we are grateful to many people who have done a great job to stop such carnage, to stop such Holocaust, if we may say, in the 20th centuries. We will get into the details of this. Just to remind some of the our audiences here, there's a piece that was done by Christina Amanpour, I believe, and we're going to give this, it's about like, a few minutes here, a little bit of recap what happened at that time, and then we're going to engage our speakers to talk about the events in Bosnia and what happened then. So now we are going to play the video.
A very typical pattern of radiating fractures that you get from shrapnel, bullet, that sort of thing. Back to the right, viewers.
Now, experts are assembling the pieces so that people like Kada Hotic can finally give her brother Mustapha a proper burial.
Mustapha's body was found without the head. There is a possibility it might be found in some other mass grave. If they can't find the head, we might have to bury him without it.
Unlike the Holocaust, unlike Cambodia, in Bosnia, the media was there in full force. Genocide was on the front page. I was there, and day after day, I reported the story.
The international community says there'll be no military intervention to stop this.
Now, in the era of 24-hour cable news, no one could say we didn't know. In March 1992, Yugoslavia was already breaking up along ethnic lines when Bosnia-Herzegovina declared independence. Bosnia's Serbs, Orthodox Christians, wanted their own state, and they went to war for it. Their principal victims were Bosnia's Muslim population. The Bosnian Serbs attacked parts of the capital, Sarajevo, to force the Muslims out. They destroyed mosques, they burned books, and they systematically raped Muslim women and girls.
And now the people here truly believe the world has abandoned them.
Richard Holbrooke was the consummate Washington insider. He had been an assistant secretary of state under President Carter, managing editor of the magazine Foreign Policy, and a Wall Street banker. Anxious to once again be a player in foreign policy and moved by the suffering in Bosnia, Holbrooke thought the solution was obvious: a US-led intervention to stop the Serbs.
I felt we had a moral obligation, and American leadership in the world was also at stake.
While the world called the Serbs' destruction of Muslim communities ethnic cleansing, Richard Holbrooke called it genocide.
When you said genocide, you also must have known that that did carry moral and legal obligations under international law.
Yes, of course. Everyone understood that. You can't call it genocide and then do nothing about it.
When the bloodshed began, the major European countries vowed to resolve the crisis, and President George Bush vowed to stay out.
The United States is not going to inject itself into every single crisis, no matter how heartrending.
The UN had banned arms sales to the region to reduce the violence. This left the Muslims practically defenseless against the Bosnian Serbs, who had heavy weapons from their patrons in Yugoslavia. Instead of lifting the arms embargo, the UN Security Council sent in a peacekeeping force. Its mandate was to get relief supplies to the victims, not to stop their killers. In July 1992, reporters learned about Serb concentration camps in Bosnia. Muslim prisoners were tortured, sexually mutilated, and executed. These images hadn't been seen in Europe since the Holocaust. In prime time, they stirred US public opinion, but not enough to change US policy.
We are not going to get bogged down in some guerrilla warfare. And I don't care what the pressures are.
So you were here in August of '92.
Appalled by the atrocities,
We came out.
Richard Holbrooke went to Bosnia as a member of a refugee relief organization. He wanted to see for himself.
What was it that you saw here?
People were lined up, and there were soldiers with weapons everywhere.
Here, in the city of Banja Luka, he saw Bosnia's Serbs forcing the Muslims to sign over their property in exchange for their lives and a one-way ticket out of town.
And I thought, Christian, I'm seeing a color remake of the black and white scenes we'd seen in World War II of Jews signing away their property at the point of a gun and then being shipped off to who knows where.
Holbrooke's own Jewish grandfather had fled Germany in 1933 as Hitler came to power. Did it resonate with your own family experience?
I don't think you have to be Jewish to understand that what you're seeing was a genuine crime against humanity.
Ending the crime, Holbrooke thought, might require the US to bomb Serb military targets inside Bosnia.
I took the stand that I believed was correct. I didn't think it was so controversial.
In that summer of '92, Holbrooke was supporting Bill Clinton's presidential campaign, offering advice on Bosnia.
We may have to use military force. I would begin with air power against the Serbs.
Holbrooke had his eye on a job in a Clinton administration. But in the back of his mind, a lingering question.
Will he do as president what he said he would do as candidate?
December 1992. Bosnia's capital, Sarajevo, was under attack. The Bosnian Serbs shelled the city, cut the power, and blocked the roads. Snipers were everywhere.
It may already be too late to save tens of thousands of people.
I was there, reporting on the siege, a ruthless 3-year attempt to drive the Muslims out of their multi-ethnic city.
So up there, that's where all the guns were.
Richard Holbrooke, then a Wall Street banker, made his second trip to Bosnia. At Serb checkpoints, he had to use a fake UN identity card.
Why did you make these trips that involved faking IDs, sneaking in? What motivated you so much?
People weren't paying attention. I didn't go to solve the problem because I was a private citizen, but there was a sense of bearing witness.
What he saw appalled him. UN peacekeepers powerless even to bring food to starving people because they had to negotiate with Bosnian Serb militias.
They should have shot their way in if necessary. And had they shot their way in, the Serbs would have melted away because they were thugs and bullies.
Bill Clinton, who had campaigned on a promise of tough action, was about to enter the White House. And Holbrooke wanted to be the new president's point man on Bosnia. In a memo to Clinton's top advisors, Holbrooke again recommended direct use of force against the Serbs.
And by advocating vigorous action, I was kind of marginalized.
Instead of getting Bosnia, Holbrooke was named U.S. ambassador to Germany.
You were basically, for want of a better term, screaming bloody murder, and they weren't listening.
Well, I was very frustrated, but the political pressures were running the other way.
The European allies opposed airstrikes.
We know the rest of the story, and I think we are going to hear more from you, especially from another important person in this event that really was able to push the U.S. to take firm action, and we are very honored to have him here with us. So I'm introducing now our great speakers. We're going to start with Dr. Mustapha Ceric, who is the Grand Mufti Emeritus of Bosnia. I do have the wonderful biography of him in the email that we sent out, and I want to save the time so that we can get more of our speakers to talk about the event, and then we'll be followed with Ambassador retired, I believe, Robert Hunter, who was the U.S. ambassador to NATO, and he also, his bio is in the email that we send out to everyone on this event. And then we'll be followed by Dr. Mirsad, who is also very helpful, especially to me, to put together this event and be able to reach out to Ambassador Hunter. I'm very grateful to all of you, our guests, and we will get the ball rolling. And the first will be Dr. Mustapha Ceric, who is going to talk to us about how his reflection in all of this and how he can now share with us also the future of Bosnia. Let me just remind our speakers, each one has 20 minutes. I wish I can give you more. And then we will be followed with 10 minutes question and answer. Either we make them after the presentation, or we can gather them at the end and we will direct the questions as they come. I'm open either way, but I would like to give each speaker the chance to be questioned and answering anything that he missed or the audience would like to hear from him. So I would like to start with Dr. Mustapha Ceric, and then we will proceed with the rest of the speakers. Dr. Mustapha, it's all yours.
Thank you, Brother Osama. Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon. Here is morning. This is 15 July 2020 in Sarajevo. Thank you very much for inviting me for this conference. I was thinking what to say because we just witnessed 25th anniversary of genocide in Srebrenica, where 47 states, European heads of states and government and multilateral organizations took part, including Secretary General of UN. And I made my comment on my Facebook that on this year, on the 11th of July, the British proposal for the Security Council of UA to get the resolution on Srebrenica genocide or Serbian genocide in Srebrenica, as you know, with the support of UN, United States and other European countries, it was blocked by Russian Federation by veto. And therefore, Russia took this anti-civilizational position at this time. But on the 11th of July, we witnessed that this veto was derogated by all these united voices, including French president and German president and all other prime ministers from Denmark and Netherlands and Sweden and other states, including the Middle East and Asia states like Malaysia and Saudi Arabia and President of Iran. So Bosnia witnessed again that it can put together all the governments and people about around its cause. Now, our after 25 years of the experience or the survival genocidal experience, and me being in the front or in the midst of especially mothers of Srebrenica, I would like to make this presentation or this encounter with you with two sides, if I may say, good one and a bad one. Now you probably would ask, how can you talk about good one anyway after genocide? Well, always you have two good people and bad people in bad times and bad people in good times. So nothing is absolutely perfect in this world. So let me start with this good side, and then I will talk to, because I would like you to remember probably the things that we don't like in Bosnia after all of this, as we didn't like at the beginning. The good side is, I said it when in Davos World Economic Forum, I participated for 7 years in the capacity of the Grand Mufti of Bosnia. And I remember this moment when we were in a indoor at Davos with President Clinton. He was already former president of the US, and the president of Mexico. They had a exchange of Mexico-American relationship. And after they talk, we had the Q&A, and then I raised my hand and to make a comment. And I said to President Clinton, I want to witness as a Grand Mufti, it was God and you Americans that saved us Muslims in the Balkan. And I want this to be recorded. And this is true. And then I said, but this but is not very pleasing, but why genocide? And I saw on the face of President Clinton at that time, when I said that America saved us, he was very happy, of course. But then when I said but, he was embarrassed, really. And then I don't want to explain to you, but you can imagine that his explanation was that there were people who were against the intervention and stopping and so on, but he is hero. I consider him hero, and Holbrooke came as a result of his presidency. And if it not were for the Holbrooke's risk visit to Yugoslavia on Bosnia and Herzegovina, and especially our heroine, really, Amanpour, Christine Amanpour, who, without her reporting through CNN, genocide in Bosnia and Herzegovina would be just once upon a time, there was a good people in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Now, the good aspect of what happened in Bosnia and genocide, and I don't need to dwell on the meaning of genocide, on the first use of the word of genocide by Professor Raphael Lemkin and all this. When I was a student at the University of Chicago, I did not care about Holocaust. I did not care about genocide, because we thought that with Tito, we will live forever in peace and tranquility. But when something happened to you, then you realize how it is important to know the pain other people. Recently, we had our conference, which is the 4th International Sarajevo Conference on the theme Stop Genocide and Holocaust Denial. I send you a copy, probably you can use it later on. Now, the good thing of the genocide in Bosnia, or Serbian genocide on the Bosniaks, Muslims, is that for the first time in the history of mankind, I can say, we had UN who got a resolution of establishing an international tribunal for the war crimes against humanity, genocide in the Hague. That's the precedent that the humanity didn't visit before. So we can say, after all what we were suffering and everything, that this is a good aspect of it. And now we, as you know, for the first time in the history, you had the top military and political people who were brought to the justice, international justice in the Hague. And then again, I want to praise my American people, and this is why I am proud to be Chicagoan, the Chicagoan boy, and Chicago is my kind of city, I can say. And there are people, when I visited once of my visits, in especially after 11th of September, there were some Muslims who were scared, as you know. But when I visited them, they said, well, we have one American-made mufti. So yes, I am proud to be American-made mufti from the University of Chicago. And University of Chicago is really something that I remember every day, because that was the time in the Reagan time, in 80s, that I was able to study Islam in the context of America and my people of Bosnia with Fazlur Rahman, rahimahullah. Now, I can, so we may say that after all, we got some satisfaction of the truth, justice, peace, and reconciliation. But this is not enough. Even the Nuremberg procedure after the Holocaust was not a civilian court. It was a military, martial court, if you like. The only tribune, the court, the justice was, international justice was done by the support of the whole international community, was in the case of the Bosniak Muslims, especially after the genocide in Srebrenica. Now, this is something of good aspect of it, and to feel somehow that we as Muslims in the Balkan Peninsula in Bosnia and Herzegovina are not neglected totally. And then I cannot but say that the Jewish organization all over the world understood the best our case, and they felt that this happening again to themselves, not only to Bosnia. And there is another reason why the Jewish communities were with us. It is because Sarajevo received the Jews in 1492 when they were executed, expelled from Spain, from the Inquisition, and brought with them the Sarajevo Haggadah, very famous Sarajevo Haggadah. I am very proud of this. So the message is, do something good for your children so they can benefit in the future when they need it the most. The bad thing of genocide in Bosnia, Serbian genocide in Bosnia, especially Srebrenica, even though Srebrenica is not alone, as you know, the other places. Srebrenica was probably the end of the genocide, but the beginning of genocide was in many other parts of Bosnia. The bad aspect of the Sarajevo, of the Bosnian genocide, Serbian genocide in Bosnia, is that the effects or the result of genocide are living. Unfortunately, the same international community that participated and the acknowledgement of UN that this was a genocide, that this was a mistake, that this was a failure of the international community, but still we are now dealing with the triumph of genocide in Bosnia, meaning that what Serbs wanted to achieve in Bosnia, to have their own state, this is what is happening now. So the remains and the traces of genocide are not removed. The difference between what happened in Germany and in Bosnia is that the traces of fascism or Nazism or the Third Reich was removed totally. In case of Bosnia, these results of genocide is somehow paid off. And this is why we have now in Bosnia the so-called the last stage of genocide, which is the denial of genocide, very, very powerful and strong in Serbia. And not only that they denied the genocide, denied the international verdicts on genocide, but they are glorifying genocide. And it is as if genocide is good. So we are now faced as a community in Bosnia and Herzegovina with the possibility of a new genocide, because the generations now, in the schools and in the media and the intelligentsia, and unfortunately the Orthodox Church, they all deny genocide openly. Not only that they deny, they are defying and glorifying genocide in the face of the victims of genocide. So I will stop here, and probably later on we can discuss about it more if there are people who are interested in. But before I end my part, I would like to greet my dear brother Talat Osman. We are still alive, dear brother Talat. You visited us and you participated in the inauguration of me, the Grand Mufti of Bosnia, in War and Peace. I greet you, your family, and please don't forget to say salam to all my dear brothers and friends in Chicago. I like you. I like you in America. Please take care of yourself from Corona. Don't listen to those who tell you you don't need masks and social distances. And then I just want to put my voice with all these people. I don't want to be Democrat or Republican. I like you all. But in this case, I just want to be an American. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Mustapha. That was very, very enlightening, and we do appreciate what you have shared with us today. I know it has been an overwhelming experience for you and for every Bosnian Muslims out there. I'm going to open the floor for questions. I have a hands been raised here. Laurel Kearns would like to speak, I would believe. Okay.
My apologies. I did not mean to raise my hand. I am very grateful to be here. I learned so much about what happened from my student, Safet Chadovic, And so I'm just honored to be able to listen and learn more. Thank you.
Sure, no problem. Okay. Any questions from our audience here that we can?
May I?
Yes, of course.
May I, Ablasi?
Yes, of course. I sent you a link to be able, so that we can be able to see you. I don't know if you've been able to watch your phone or to connect with your email.
I guess I don't know how to do that, but
Okay.
I do want to say that, first of all, to my brother, my dear brother, Mustapha, we love you here. Your home is in Chicago. It is your home. And we wish that we could see you here in our city. I do want you to know that I very much enjoyed and appreciated the invitation that you extended to me when you were installed as Rais al-Ulama the first time in Sarajevo in the 90s. And also you invited me again to when you retired from that position 14 years later. And I enjoyed the ceremony, and I certainly enjoyed being with you and with your family. And I wish you and wish them all the best and good health and a very happy future. I did want to mention when Brother Osama talked to me about this particular event, it brought to mind. I had at one time during the war, I did talk to President Bush, and I did ask him about providing, ending basically the sanctions on arms so that the Bosnian Muslims can defend themselves. Since no one's defending them, at least allow them to have arms to defend themselves. And I was told, he told me to talk to the National Security Advisor, who at the time was Prince Scowcroft. And I did talk to him, and I asked him the same thing. I said, why not allow the Muslims in Bosnia to receive arms to defend themselves when the Serbs are receiving all types of arms from Russia and the total supply line coming from Belgrade to Pali and so on. And he said, right now, we want to make sure they have humanitarian aid, etc. And we don't want to expand the war. I said, why not allow Turkey to move in and defend them, because the Bosnians were being called Turks by the Serbs. And Turkey would have an opportunity then to basically match and exceed the strength of the Serbs and end the war. And he said that would expand it, and we don't want to expand the war. We just want to provide humanitarian services, which I thought was very, very unfortunate and very unfair for people not to be able or allowed to defend themselves and no one to defend them. But alhamdulillah, it's over, and we have to remember it and never forget it. I did want to ask our brother Mustapha, where does he see this going now? The Dayton Accords really stopped the war, as you mentioned, but it did not really save or present a viable solution to Bosnia being a state governed as a state. What is your response to that?
Well, can I speak now?
Yes, please.
Yeah, very short. The future of Bosnia is in Atlantic associations. First of all, to be a member of EU. We are on that road. There are blockades from the Serbian side. Russia is not only that Russia is meddling with your election in Bosnia, in America, it is meddling with us here. So unfortunately, for the first time in the history, the Russian military troops are somehow present in the Balkan. And I think this is the negligence recently. I can say that during the Barack Obama administration, President Barack Obama didn't visit Bosnia, but his vice president Biden visited Bosnia, and he knows very much, very well. This is why we are supporting. If I may, you don't mind if I meddle now with your election in America. If we say that we would like to see Vice President Biden to be elected next time, but don't take me this as to interfere in your affairs. You have right to interfere in my affairs. Welcome, but I have no right to interfere in your affairs anyway. No, so this is what Bosnia needs, and I think that European leaders are realizing that the peace of Europe, and the Balkan and Europe is in Bosnia. You must remember that this first world war started in Sarajevo. So the last century started with the World War in Sarajevo, and the last century ended with the war in Sarajevo. You must understand. And the Pope, when Pope visited Sarajevo, he called it Jerusalem of Europe. I wish it's not like Jerusalem, first Jerusalem in the world. And therefore, Bosnia, the only solution for Bosnia now is to become a full member of EU and the equal member of the European family. And the second, the most important, even more important than European Union, is that the Bosnia become a part of NATO. And we have now a big position of Belgrade and Serbia, and especially those in Bosnia, against that supported by Russia. Even Russian ambassador recently, which was not common from the Russian ambassador to say that, he said openly that Bosnia should not or must not be a member of NATO, because that would be, according to his theory, against the peace and stability of Bosnia. It is just the contrary. So we would urge, we know who is the master, who is the boss in NATO. And so we would like to ask our boss to take this seriously on time, so that we don't make mistakes as we made it at the beginning. So I hope that the Ambassador Hunt will carry our message to the ears of those who are deciding about who should be member of NATO or not. So, and just to remind you, Montenegro is now part of NATO. And if it is not now a part of NATO, Montenegro, it would be already occupied by Serbia. And also Macedonia is a full member of NATO. Slovenia is there, Croatia is. So we don't want to be isolated island, and to live under the fear of a new genocide, which is possible if Bosnia does not become member of EU very soon, and it does not become a full member of NATO in terms of the security, peace and security in the Balkan and in this part of Europe, then there is possibility for a next genocide. I want you to remember that, and I want to be recording this. This is possible. The mentality, the media, the propaganda on the level of intellectuals, politicians, religious people, and the appearance and the defiance that we see, and especially cooperation with the Russian military forces, military segments, we see that all the signs that we saw in 1992. So which of course we believe in God, and God is the one who will decide everything. And in terms of peace and security, but in the terms of the world history and the world circumstances in which we live, we believe that EU and NATO, not only that we deserve this, but also they have the duty to do this because they failed first time. Thank you, Brother Talat, for your question.
Thank you, Dr. Mustapha, for your answer. We really appreciate it. Now let's move on to another major player in the Bosnian situation here that really was also instrumental in bringing some kind of end to the carnage that was going on. I'm very pleased to have Ambassador Robert Hunter to join us now and make his presentation. Ambassador Hunter, please, the floor is yours.
And thank you very much. It's an honor to be with these distinguished people. I just wish we were on a happier occasion. And perhaps there will be an occasion we can all get together and talk about the future and more pleasant things. But it's also important, I think, to recall what happened 25 years ago and to continue every day to learn the lessons from it. Because it's already been said, what happened at that time did, I think, wake up people in Europe, at least, to understand that the phrase never again also has to apply to the kinds of things that happen in Bosnia-Herzegovina. And that we must make sure, not just in Europe but elsewhere, that humanitarian crises and yes, genocide is something that will pass from the earth. It's going to require effort all the time in lots of places. But after what happened in Srebrenica, certainly in Europe and in the Atlantic world, nobody can ever again turn a blind eye to this kind of tragedy and this kind of crime. This kind of crime. There's no other word for it. Nothing in the nature of conflict and various sides having different views can justify what was done by Serbs to others, and particularly to the Muslim population of Bosnia-Herzegovina. It just even thinking about it after 25 years, it really still breaks our heart. Now, as already been indicated, the Bush administration had decided that George H.W. Bush, that this was not a conflict for the United States to get involved in. And I think that was also true early in the Clinton administration. And one of the inhibitions was because of what had happened with the United States involved in Somalia. You've seen the film Black Hawk Down, where the United States lost a number of personnel in Somalia. And that, I think, chastened people in the administration in the United States saying, hey, we don't want to get involved in another conflict somewhere far beyond places we've never heard of and risk and perhaps sacrifice American lives. So that was in the background. It was probably incorrect, but it was in the background. I was, along with a number of other people, one of those people who, as early as the early months of the war in Bosnia-Herzegovina, the war of aggression by Serbia and its proxies that we know about, who became deeply concerned by the moral imperative there was for my country and for others to get involved, but also a recognition that if there was going to be a chance to build beyond what we had had in the Cold War, if it were possible to have security and peace in Europe that would have some chance of lasting, we couldn't just see going back to the kinds of things that Dr. Mustapha already pointed out, that on the 28th of June in 1914, the fuse was lit that started not just the First World War, but the 75-year European Civil War. I'm one of the people on my first visit to Sarajevo. I stood in the footsteps of Gavrilo Princip, who stood there on that particular day and fired the shots that started the First World War. So it was clear to a lot of us, we have to do things to stop this war in Bosnia-Herzegovina, as well as prevent the war elsewhere in the former Yugoslavia. We'd already seen it in Slovenia and some other places. So when I had the honor to be appointed by President Clinton to be the United States ambassador to NATO, where we were then and maybe even today are the 800-pound gorilla with an awful lot of influence, that it was going to be important not just to get my own country to step up to the mark, but to get the NATO alliance to do so as well. Because it was quite obvious, if we could not get the NATO allies to do something about a conflict in their own backyard, how were we going to convince the American people to do it? The way we were going to convince the American people to do it is if we were doing it with the NATO allies. And it was one painful step after another. We've already heard about from the presentation by Ms. Amanpour that the United Nations put together the United Nations Protection Force UNPROFOR to go into Bosnia-Herzegovina, but with no mandate to do anything real. They were like a glorified police department which had no mandate even to stop crime on the streets. It was virtually useless. In fact, for some of the NATO allies, I'm not going to name any names, but who did not want to get involved in this country, this war, UNPROFOR was a cop-out, because they were always able to say, up until the moment when NATO finally acted decisively, beginning at the end of August, 3 years later in 1995, UNPROFOR was an excuse. They would say, no, wait a second, we have our troops on the ground, the 9 NATO allies who did, plus some others. And if we're on the ground and if our people getting killed, well, hey, we can't have that. In fact, as we recall, I think it was May in 1995, at one point the Bosnian Serb forces took some UN soldiers hostage. To underscore the point, well, NATO did one step after another with the reluctance of our partners at the United Nations Security Council, where Russia and China really didn't have to take a position whether they were prepared to do something or not prepared to do it, because the British and French made sure it didn't happen. And particularly the British, for reasons I've still never understood. Partly it was the experience in World War II, partly it was they were having internal difficulties with their royalty, and the only institution in Britain that had any credibility at that point was the military. They didn't want to get involved. Anyway, the British fought what I was trying to do at NATO for the 2 years I was there, beginning in July of '93 when I first came, until we finally got the job done at the end of August, beginning of September 1995. So there were some UN resolutions, and they had 3 elements of the use of military force. Number one was to say nobody could fly an airplane over the country. Well, that worked most of the time, but not all the time, because sometimes the Serbs would fly in a helicopter with Red Cross markings on it, and we could see it. We could see that with our air patrols. And the helicopter would land, and then some soldiers would get out. Okay, that was a violation. Then there was another element that was invoked, saying if the UNPROFOR forces on the ground were in trouble, and we know who they would be in trouble from, they could call up air patrols that were flying overhead all the time, and they could ask for assistance on the ground. Well, they never did. They never did ask for that assistance. And incidentally, in the Operation Deny Flight, as it was called, NATO actually flew an awful lot of sorties to make sure nobody would fly airplanes, meaning the Serbs, except for what I've already mentioned. And in fact, NATO flew more than 100,000 air sorties for 2.5 years. But then the third one, which was much more important, the United Nations finally declared a bunch of what they called safe areas. I think there were 7 of them. I can be corrected by my colleagues. And it said, all right, in these areas, which will be refuge areas for people who would be at risk, some Croats, mostly Muslims, in these areas from which all heavy weapons would be excluded to a distance of 25 kilometers. And that meant no mortars and no artillery and the like. And they would be safe against being attacked from the outside areas. Now, that was attacked by anybody. That's the way the UN resolution was written. But everybody knew it meant the Serbs, or the Bosnian Serbs, doing it for not just Mr. Mladic and Mr. Karadzic, but also for Mr. Milosevic sitting up there in Sarajevo. Well, unfortunately, there were a number of attacks on the safe areas. I remember one in February of 1993. There happened to be a NATO conference going on down in Germany with a lot of NATO ambassadors and other people. And there was the attack on the marketplace in Sarajevo. A lot of people were killed. And I'm sure Dr. Mustapha, I assume, I don't know whether you were there at the time, but everybody was aware of that. Everybody be aware again of when that happened in, I think it was July of 1995, again in the same place. The Russians, of course, claimed, oh, that was probably something the Bosnians did to themselves, and this really wasn't the Serbs and all of that. But we didn't have to worry about the Russians. What we had to do was worry about the British and the French. The French also didn't want to get engaged, and also a lot of the other allies were reluctant to do it, to get dragged into this. Now, when I was NATO ambassador, finally, the United States government decided that it was going to move to lift the arms embargo against the Bosnian Muslims, and also to be engaged in airstrikes, but only in airstrikes if we could get the European allies to do it. Again, how do you convince the Americans to do it by ourselves if the Europeans weren't going to do it? And unfortunately, what happened with the lifting of the embargo, there was a lot of funny business that went on, which meant that when the United States declared we would no longer enforce the embargo, what the other countries did is they moved the American forces out of the way to a different part of the coast, the Adriatic coastline. So the people who were continuing with the embargo were not Americans, they were Europeans who were against it. It was a bunch of funny business. Okay, so we had a total of 8 or 9 meetings at NATO, 8 of which I represented the United States. We had a team come from Washington the first time. We didn't do very good job. And that began at the end of July. And we took a total of, I think, 8 airstrike decisions. Well, yes, we did, and no, we didn't, because getting them implemented was extraordinarily difficult. And it had a couple of reasons. One, there were a couple of NATO military leaders who didn't want to do it, one of whom was an American. Now, that was not true of the people in the Pentagon. The Secretary of Defense, Mr. Perry, and the man who'd been Supreme Allied Commander of Europe, who then became the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Shalikashvili, who is a Georgian by origin, who grew up in Poland, but he understood what the stakes were, and he supported what we wanted to do from the beginning. Unfortunately, and I have to say this, the American negotiator, Ambassador Holbrooke, talked a very good game. And we heard in the presentation when he was interviewed by Ms. Amanpour about all he was doing, but he actually opposed the use of NATO air power. He talked about it, but when it came down to actually doing something about it, he was against it. And I faced that from beginning to end. I call that hypocrisy. I shouldn't maybe say that the man is dead now and he can't defend himself, but he was a part of the problem from my perspective, not part of the solution of getting air power done. Now, there was another element to it, that there was a requirement put into the UN resolution of what they called a two-key arrangement. If we were going to use air power in defense of a safe area, it wasn't just NATO to take a decision. That was my job, to get the NATO allies to do it. And the NATO secretaries general were very supportive, beginning with Manfred Werner, who unfortunately died prematurely, and leading up to the other two NATO secretaries general who were involved in that, Willie Klaas and then later on Solana, all of whom were very strongly in favor of using military power. But the way the resolution was written is there was what they call a two-key system. NATO could turn its key, but it also had to be turned by the United Nations Secretary General Boutros Ghali. And in fact, he was so worried that his representative in Zagreb might exceed his authority and go ahead and say, do it, that he brought in the Japanese to be there in Zagreb so he wouldn't be affected. Now, you can say, well, why didn't the UN Secretary General go along? Because he said, wait a second, I've got 5 members on the Security Council. One's in favor of it. 2, probably Russia and China, they really don't want to be bothered with it, okay? Because China in particular, because they didn't want to get into a situation where people might start doing about them. And the Russians were kind of ambivalent. They were pro-Serb, but they didn't want to get caught being the bad guys. And Boutros Ghali said, now, wait a second. I've got 2 of my 5 members of the Security Council against this. One was France, and then Britain was dead set against it. In fact, at one point, when we had a decision out of NATO actually to use a certain amount of force, the British, one of the commanders, not the American commander in Naples, American admiral, he gave an order to the British commander on the ground in Sarajevo to allow this to happen. The British government sent an order to their commander to defy the order of the NATO commander. They didn't tell us about it, but we had ways of finding out. Right? We found out. Okay, so then what happened? 2 things happened, which changed things fundamentally. First, we were trying to make NATO something that could work for the future. I had the honor of being the lead architect of that, did most of the negotiation. It was a hard process. What we did was a number of things. We took Central Europe off the geopolitical chessboard. We had a special relationship with Ukraine. Later on, we had a special relationship with Russia. We created the NATO Military Command, created something called Combined Joint Task Forces. We created a new relationship with the European communities as then was. We put together a whole package to try to say, yes, NATO could be relevant to the future. And then people came along and they said, now, wait a second. What do you mean you're relevant to the future? We have taking place in Europe, in Bosnia, Herzegovina, the worst fighting since World War II. And not just fighting, but it is genocide. And you big deals at NATO, you think you're so great, and you can't even stop this little war. Compared to World War II, it was a little war. And in fact, everybody had already decided at that point, unfortunately, this was true. No matter what happens in Bosnia or in Yugoslavia, we're not going to have a world war over it. We're not going to let this happen like happened in 1914. But then people said, wait a second, how can we have NATO work for the future if we can't do this? And then a terrible thing happened. The tragedy, the crime at Sarajevo. I remember sitting in my office And the Canadian ambassador came to see me. And the Canadians were involved in UNPA4. And they said, the ambassador said, I've just heard from our Dutch colleague some very disturbing news from a place called Srebrenica, one of the safe areas. It appears that a lot of people have been slaughtered. Well, we didn't know about that, so immediately I got on the phone and got back to Washington. And I said, I have this report. I've confirmed it with my Dutch colleague, and it appears that there's been this mass slaughter. And what happened, we in Washington immediately went to the intelligence people and they got out the photographs. And they got the photographs that had been taken a couple, 3 months earlier, and it had just been taken, and they could see freshly plowed ground, which we found out very promptly were mass graves of about 7,000 people, which was done by Mr. Ceric and Mr. Mladic. And then we got the reports from the Dutch. And the Dutch were in an unfortunate position because as part of UNFOR, they didn't have orders to act and they didn't have the arms to act. That was one of the things some of the countries made. Well, at that point, I was able to, with the strong support of everybody in the United States government, and with the president going directly to his colleagues in Britain and France and elsewhere, and they held a meeting in London, and say, okay, enough is enough. And at that point, the British, I was always when we negotiated, I could put the French in a corner and they would go along, all right? But the British were over the last, and then they fought us. And finally, the British understood, we've got to go along. And as soon as that happened, Boutros-Ghali turned his key, NATO turned its key, NATO started acting, and in 18 days, the war came to an end. After that, there was the Dayton Accords and all that, but the war was already over. And one of the ironies, of course, is after the 24 hours after we started the bombing, Ambassador Holbrooke said, oh, you got to stop the bombing so I can go up to Belgrade and negotiate an end. Well, that was rubbish. He was being played by Milosevic. And sure enough, he went out and it failed. So I had the job of getting the bombing restarted along with the NATO secretary. We got it restarted, which showed actually the firm resolve of everybody. And 17 days later, the war came to an end. And the rest is history. But think of how many people who died, not just at Srebrenica, men, women, children, but the 200,000 plus who had died in the 3 years beforehand, who didn't have to die if people had had the backbone, particularly our European allies, to stand up and do something to prevent what had happened in World War II in a minor scale, to prevent another genocide, another mini Holocaust, and another terrible black mark on Western and European civilization. I don't like to say that anybody who died in Bosnia-Herzegovina died for a cause. But if indeed it means that we will take a second look the next time and not allow that to happen, then the people of Bosnia-Herzegovina, suffering all that time, will have made a major contribution to humanity. But only if we remember all the time what happened there for the 3 years and what happened particularly in Srebrenica can we make a difference for humanity. So I want to thank all of you with your particular background, Dr. Mustapha, the others who have been involved in this, for all that you have done. You were thankful to the United States, but quite frankly, we Americans have to be thankful to the people of your country for pointing out the moral responsibilities that we all share. I'll stop at that point.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Hunter. That was really breathtaking to see the intricate details of such an event that is not available to everyone. I think we are fortunate enough to read history from a different perspective, especially from those who made it. And we are very grateful for your role. We are very grateful for everyone who supported you on your mission. And I'm sure generations to come, the Bosnians and every Muslim around the world will always remember what you have done. And we are
Well, it's not me. It was my colleagues, the United States, and eventually the Allies. I just happened to be the guy on the spot at the time.
I'm sure. And that's why you and everyone who supported you on this, of course, the United States at that time was really a lantern to shine for Europe. Europe always have failed the world in many, many cases. And I'm afraid they are still trying to fail them in Libya and Syria, but I hope it won't be too late to come back to their senses and do something. I'm gonna save the questions to get one more speaker, and that is Dr. Mirsad. And then we will have a question for Ambassador Hunter and Dr. Mirsad, so that I will combine the questions. I really would like to get the time for the speakers here, and definitely we will have time for the questions. I do have one for you, so please stay tuned if you don't mind. Okay, Dr. Mirsad, the floor is yours, and I'm sure that you're going to help us to make this a quick one too. Thank you.
All right, yes. First of all, thank you for inviting me, and thank to ICNA Social Justice Council. They are the ones who actually initiated this whole thing, and it is an example of a great work they do. They also did a great work during the Bosnian War, where they organized Bosnian task force to put pressure, you know, from the people's side on our government to actually do something to take that moral high ground that it did eventually. Okay, my job is somewhat different than other two speakers who were much more relaxed when they spoke. But I'd like to recall something that Dr. Hunter will probably appreciate. Believe it or not, Dr. Hunter, 2 days ago was 142 years anniversary of the Berlin Treaty, which actually took Bosnia from Ottoman Empire and placed it under the Austro-Hungarian administration. So it's very strange that July is so important in Bosnia for all these reasons, and we are doing this event just a few days after Srebrenica Genocide commemoration happens on July 11th, and we're doing, like I said, 2 days after the Berlin Treaty of 1878. So my job is to somewhat contextualize for people who are not familiar with Bosnian Muslims, who they are and what is their story, so that we can have a better understanding of what Dr. Ceric and Dr. Hunter spoke. You have to all understand, I'm a little bit scared. Both of these people are very significant people. Dr. Hunter is certainly a person that I admire. I learned from him. I had a chance to listen to his presentations before, and always learn so much. And Dr. Ceric, being that he is our spiritual and religious leader, I'm a little bit apprehensive to speak in front of him, but I hope he will forgive me all the mistakes that I may do. So first, I want to say who the Bosnian Muslims are. Bosnian Muslims refer to themselves nowadays as Bosniaks, and they live throughout Southeastern European region, also known as Balkans. Just to remind you, Europe actually originates from there. Europa was stolen from Lebanon, brought to Greece and then expanded. And what is now Europe used to be a barbarian land. So Europe starts in Balkans, right? That's very important. I like to remind people of that. So Bosniaks are essentially European Slavic speaking Muslims who accepted Islam during 14th and 15th century, while some new studies talk about conversion to Islam that began earlier in 11th and even 9th century, essentially at the same time when local peoples started to accept Christianity. So Bosniaks nowadays live in several countries as native population in that region, primarily in Bosnia and Herzegovina, where they now constitute over 50% of the population. in often forgotten and neglected region of Sanjak, now divided between the state of Serbia and Montenegro, where they are also majority of the population, while they have also smaller numbers of Bosniaks that live in Kosovo, Albania, and Macedonia as native people. So now several millions of Bosniaks also live in Turkey, and small number of them in other countries of the Middle East, such as Syria and Lebanon. I mean, there are some smaller pockets throughout the former Ottoman Empire, but these are kind of groups that still sometimes recognize themselves as Bosniaks. There is also, because of our recent history, large diasporic groups of Bosniaks that can be found in Germany and in the United States, where estimates state that between 150,000 to 250,000 Bosniaks came here as refugees. Major Bosniak centers in the United States are St. Louis, Missouri, where there are numbers are mentioned in the range of 70,000. Most of them live in the South County. Chicago is considered as an old center of Bosniaks in the US, and until recently was considered to be intellectual and political centers of Bosniaks in North America in general. But that centers have shifted, since other parts of the country now have much more significant Bosnian population, like Lawrenceville, Georgia, Jacksonville, Florida, Phoenix, Arizona, Hartford, Connecticut, Detroit, Michigan, as well as Utica, New York City, and New Jersey, where Bosniaks are mainly from the region of Sanjak. And there are a lot of them, Bosniaks who live in North Carolina, Nebraska, and Iowa. In Iowa, so much so that a mayor of Waterloo a few years ago was a young Bosnian woman, Anela Kajtezovic. And speaking of the current situation, you heard about the outbreak in meatpacking factories in Iowa. This is actually happening among Bosniaks who are working there, trying to provide us with meat during this crisis. Bosniaks also now have several media stations throughout the United States, as well as two national organizations, one being primarily social and cultural, Congress of Bosniaks of North America, another primarily religious Islamic community of North American Bosniaks. So they are one vibrant Muslim community, and I hope all those Muslim political engagement groups are paying attention, especially now in the lead up to the historic national elections in November, and so that they can engage with them and see perhaps how Bosniaks can help in that matter. Now, I was also asked to speak about Bosnian Muslim nationhood and that kind of transition to Bosniak identity and everything that entails. I'm actually writing a book on that subject, currently under the review by University of Michigan Press. So I would first note that Bosnian Muslims, or Bosniaks, were recognized as a nation within the Ottoman Empire already. However, that meant a different thing than what nation means in the Western European sense now. Being part of the Ottoman Empire, and after that also part of some of other pan-Slavic southeastern fantasies and projects called Yugoslavia, Bosnian Muslims were encouraged and often forced to work, contribute, and even sacrifice toward these projects, and neglect their own interests and national aspirations, and they did. During the last years of Ottoman Empire, Bosniaks lost so many men fighting wars to defend empire that occasionally they had to hide the exact number of dead young men, and some chronicles note losses of more than 10% of the population. And when you understand that those dead were mostly men, you can see the impact on the population was actually much bigger. After Ottoman withdrawal from the Balkans, millions of Bosniaks were forced to leave, and the columns of refugees were heading toward modern-day Turkey, all the way until 1970s, when Dr. Hunter visited Belgrade. Bosniaks were leaving to Turkey. There's a significant number of Bosniaks living in Turkey, and although they are now fully integrated into Turkish society, many of them still remember where they come from. During the World War II, almost the entire war in Yugoslavia was fought in the territories in Bosnia and Sanjak, where Muslims, Bosniaks were either a majority population or significant population in that territory. These areas were bombed by everyone, Germans, Italians, allies, adding onto constant massacres that they were subjected to by the Serbian and Croatian Nazi collaborators, and occasionally even Tito's partisans. It's very important to note there is a recent book, maybe historic book, about the role of Bosnian Muslims in the World War II that sheds the light on that. After the Second World War, Bosnian Muslims joined, first reluctantly, but then wholeheartedly, the Yugoslav Communist State and Yugoslav Nation project, neglecting their own national project under the banner of Southern Slavic concept of brotherhood and unity among all the peoples of Yugoslavia. It was well known during that time that the Muslims of Yugoslavia embraced that idea the strongest, and those who had a chance to attend or be there during the Winter Olympics Games in Sarajevo in 1984 could have seen that. But Bosniaks were only hugely disappointed when during the dissolution of Yugoslavia in late 1980s and 1990s, they saw that while they were almost fully committed to the idea of Yugoslavia, they were the only people in that both Yugoslavias that had a party with a Yugoslav name in it. It was called Yugoslav Muslim Organization. No other group within Yugoslavia ever had a party with Yugoslav name in it. So they were fully committed to the idea of Yugoslavia. Other people, namely Serbs, Croats, Slovenes, Hungarians, Albanians, and others were not. Shortly before the wars of Yugoslavia dissolution began in Slovenia, Bosnian Muslims finally directed their energies and focused over their own national revival. There were some people here and there who were keeping the flames of the national idea alive before, but that idea fully blossomed in the late 80s and early 90s under the leadership of our late president, Ali Izetbegovic, and our Reis Ulema, Dr. Mustapha Ceric, who is with us tonight. After some 200 years of sleep, that Bosniak national revival culminated into reclaim of the Bosniak name and identity for themselves, and in an idea of establishing liberal democratic Republic of Bosnia and Herzegovina, which Bosniaks consider as their ancient homeland, and where, being that there were close to 50% of population at that time, Bosniaks will be one of the fully constitutive people, together with other two major groups, Serbs, who were about 35% of the population of Bosnia at that time, and Croats, who were about 17% of the population. The idea was that all those nations will be equally constitutive in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Most of the Bosniak leaders were big believers in liberal democracy, and the population of Bosnian Muslims embraced those ideals of freedom of speech, religion, choice, democracy as well. That is why they believed the United Nations so much, only to be disappointed again after they failed to stop the genocide throughout Bosnia. As Dr. Hunter also noted, it actually started in Prijedor and then ended in Srebrenica. And they failed to stop the genocide, which, as we see in the beginning, happened in the front of the eyes of the world. So it was not hidden, it was not unknown, like maybe now with Uyghurs in China. It was actually very open and upfront. So we can even consider Bosnia to be one of the first failures of the current global liberal international regime, which failed to protect liberal ideals in Bosnia. And I'm still to understand why. Maybe because the protagonists of these ideas in Bosnia were Muslims and antagonists were Christians. And that was uncomfortable for Europeans, or maybe because of something else, yet failure was painfully obvious, especially for Bosniaks and the rest of the world. But that was also an instance where our United States government finally decided to step in and intervene on the side of decency and to support values of liberal democracy. So it was not only about us, Bosniaks as Muslims who are being murdered. It was about ideas that the United States propagated for so long, as Dr. Hunter rightly pointed. So it was an instance of high and moral global leadership that the United States is very much capable of doing when it wants, and we now very much would like to see it again. From the Bosnian War example, we can see how important it is that the United States is an active part of the global liberal world order. And we can also see what could happen when the United States is absent or reluctant to lead. We Bosniaks cannot also forget the help that we got during that war from the countries such as Saudi Arabia, from Malaysia, from somewhat Turkey, and from Iran. Other countries were also trying to help, but these were the major countries that helped us during the war. Whatever the case is, Bosniaks could never forget that positive role that the United States especially played in stopping the Bosnian War, when it also forced Europeans to see Serbian government led by Slobodan Milosevic as brutal aggressors that they were. Unfortunately, that did not transfer in political arrangements that have organized Bosnia after the war, where Bosniaks were faced to accept so-called Dayton Agreement brokered by the Richard Holbrooke, which ensures that no one have won the war, but where Bosniaks were clear losers, since Bosnia was no longer a unitary state, where all who live there will be full citizens in the entire Bosnian territory, and instead Bosnia is now divided into two federal units, where Bosnian Serbs have full control and dominance of 49% of the territory, which is mostly ethnically clean, and Bosniaks and Croats control the rest. Now, I can say that since we are to remember Srebrenica, what is the point of that? Why we Bosniaks so much emphasize this Srebrenica? Well, ever since the Ottoman Empire collapsed and Bosniaks were left to fend for themselves for these past 142 years or 150 years, they were massacred and murdered indiscriminately in mass numbers at any opportune moment where the international order was unstable. But since Bosniaks did not have national and state-sanctioned institutions, those crimes were committed without any notice or condemnation. But now, when Bosnia is finally established as the homeland of Bosniaks, for the first time, Bosniaks are able to document crimes and genocide that was done to them. And so for us, Srebrenica is one of the episodes of our Golgotha that we endured for the past 150 years that symbolizes all other times of our killings and murder, that is meant to remind the world and us Bosniaks even more of what can happen if we lend our destiny to others, whether they are our neighbors or they are United Nations. This is why we cannot forget Srebrenica, and that is why Srebrenica is so important to remind all of us that we cannot relax and what can happen if the world tries to ignore crimes like that. Now, final point, why is Srebrenica genocide important for American Muslims today? First, because Bosniaks are part of the Muslim Ummah, part of the Muslim community, and being that we are the only one of the only four European nations that are overwhelmingly Muslim, it is even more important for Muslims around the world to know and to learn about Bosniaks and what happened to us, because our history and experience is Muslim experience and Muslim history. But there is also a second, more awkward reason why Bosniak experience and of Srebrenica should concern Muslims of the world and everybody else, because strangely or not, but Srebrenica genocide became a rallying point, not so much for Muslims, but for various neo-Nazi and white supremacist groups. Most of people here tonight may not know that a New Zealand murderer and terrorist on his way to masajids to kill Muslims was pumping himself for the crime by listening Serbian music glorifying crimes like Srebrenica, while on his guns were inscribed names of Serbian war criminals and those who were murdering Bosniaks and Muslims now and before. Norwegian terrorists who murdered 70 kids and people on that island a couple of years ago was glorifying Serbian crimes as a heroic acts of defense of white Christian Europe. And numerous other acts of murder and terrorism like that throughout the Western world, and especially to the United States, which many people don't pay attention, were inspired by what the Serbs did in Srebrenica and other parts of Bosnia. So now people should not misunderstand. Those acts that I'm talking are not carried by Serbs. They're carried by non-Serbs who embraced Srebrenica and Bosnian crimes as positive and exemplary of how Muslims should be dealt with. And this is not just a fringe view anymore. This year, a Nobel Prize winner for literature was given to a man who openly embraced Serbian crimes and that and what they did to Bosnian Muslims. This man attended a place where Slobodan Milosevic, a war criminal, was buried. He was, I would like to remind the whole audience that even Serbian church did not want to bury him in the cemetery, so he was buried in the backyard of his house. And this man attended his, paid the respect to him. So maybe Muslims do not remember Srebrenica and what was done there, but others do remember for much more sinister reasons. And we all, Muslims and non-Muslims, should be aware of that and understand, to go back to the beginning, that it is about those liberal world order that it needs to be, how you say, constantly defended. Otherwise, we will descend in the chaos that we saw in Srebrenica. And with that, I will finish and then open up for questions. I hope it will the time.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mirsad, for your excellent review and background and history. I've never learned the history of Bosnia before, and this really kind of, educated me, and I hope would be the same for those who did not know that before. This would have been an added educational and informational things about Bosnia and Bosniak. And since you have at the beginning mentioned ICNA social justice, who were instrumental in within the American Muslim community at the early days of the Bosnian tragedy, we are delighted to have the executive director of the ICNA social justice with us here, Dr. Zahid Bukhari, who would like to say a few words. And we are also grateful for his presence with us here tonight, because what American Muslims did during the tragedy and what they have organized at the time under the efforts of ICNA Social Justice was really remarkable. I'm one of those who will never forget those days. Dr. Zahid Bukhari, the floor is yours. Go ahead.
Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Okay, I could not see myself, but that's okay.
We can see you though.
Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. No, I'm delighted to be here in the panelists. I had the honor to meet Dr. Mustapha Ceric in Sarajevo and Dr. Hunter in Georgetown University with Professor Shiri Hunter. So, but here very briefly, as our brother Osama Jamal was saying, that this Bosnia crisis, that the whole very severe tragedy was going on. But I think the American Muslim community learned a lot. That this tragedy, first of all, the American Muslim came to know in early 92 or middle of 92, that there is a Muslim majority areas or Muslims living in center of Europe. Regardless that we consider ourselves very something that we know about Muslims in the world, but believe me, I think the American Muslims, they were not aware of that there is so much strong presence of Muslims in the heart of Europe. So we came to know. And then we came to know that what tragedy is going on. I think the first time the big issue was when the Newsday, Roy Gutman, he published a cover story of concentration camp in that area, Bosnia area, that Serbs are doing that to the Bosnian Muslims. And at that time, what Muslims were learning, not only knowing about that tragedy and that genocide and that ethnic cleansing, but they also started to unite themselves and work for the whole issue. So I think even I would say that today we have USCMO, US Council of Muslim Organization, The Bosnia task force was the first step American Muslims community took. Then ultimately it was culminated in that way that we have a unified forum today. So it was in '92 when we started, and all national organizations and Masajid, and they have this Bosnia task force. ICNA initiated that, alhamdulillah. It's not the Council of Social Justice, it was ICNA and then Bosnia task force. And what they did, I think they did the mobilization of the Muslim community through Masajid, through our communication. At that time, no internet, no all those gadgets were there, but daily the fax communication and publicizing in the Masajid. Then they had rallies. I think there's several rallies happening all over the country, but the biggest one too, one in Washington, DC, and that was that was in 1993. And then another one in New York in front of UN, that was in 1995. And the Washington, DC rally where people came all over the country, even some chartered airplane was also managed and people were coming there, around 50,000. That was the estimate. Muslim, they came together in front of White House. I think that was the biggest rally at that time. And they talk about the whole issue. In front of UN also, I think several thousand people were there. And I vividly remember that at that time, one Italian-American senator, I think Senator D'Amato, somehow we could not contact him in advance, but he sent his own staff, and then he imposed himself on our rally, and he also spoke very passionately for that issue. And as Dr. Hunter was saying that about the Russian, we had that experience. We have a delegation, we meet to the UN, the leadership over there. So in that delegation, there was a Russian delegate. And he said very plainly to us, the Muslim leadership over there, he said, listen, this is not the right door you are knocking at. For you, the right door is go to Washington, DC and knocking at over there, because that is the main key to solve this issue. And what was our demand? Our demand was, as I think it was mentioned here, lifting the embargo. This ethnic cleansing should be declared a genocide. The rape should be declared as a war crime. And those who are involved in those war crimes, like either rape or ethnic cleansing or genocide, they should be treated as war criminals. And ultimately, as I think Dr. Hunter was saying, because there was top-down efforts and there was bottom-up efforts, I think so many letters and telephone calls to senators, to White House was done by the Muslims, by all those efforts. Ultimately, Senate, I think, approved that resolution that lift the embargo, and then America intervened. Another important thing also happened, that the Muslim leadership delegation, along with Muhammad Ali, Champion Muhammad Ali. So we had meeting in 2 or 3 days in New York with UN Security Council members. That was remarkable. I think I saw the phenomena over there. The UN, all ambassadors and people, wherever we go to the office or the central office for a press conference, it was so much receiving. We saw the enthusiasm from all these delegates receiving the Muhammad Ali and the Muslim leadership, and they talk about all those issues of, as I said it before. So I think that was the experience, the Muslim community. I think the Bosnia issue was instrumental for the American Muslim community to get maturity, to get involved in the civic engagement, to work in a unified form with all national organizations and Masajid, and also is a success story because they got the results. And then I think after that, right after the issue was Dayton Accord, and I think Dr. Mirsad rightfully, all this reservation was there about that accord. But after the war is over, then we had a National Shura Council, then we have a summit, then we have a coordination council, a September 11 detour. And it's a very interesting fact that the day September 11 happened, at that time, Muslim leadership from across the country, they were here in Washington, DC to meet George Bush. But then this September 11 happened and that meeting was canceled. But that phenomena was going on, that there should be a unified platform. And ultimately, alhamdulillah, we have US Council for Muslim Organization. So that is, I think, that started from Bosnia Task Force working together, and now we have a unified platform, Bosnia, USCMO. Another, I think, the impact is the relief work. I think the Muslim relief organizations, they got that experience first working in Bosnia and Kosovo, and then refugees, when they are coming here, working with those refugees through masajid. I think that then Muslim community also got that experience, and now, alhamdulillah, several relief organizations, they are working internationally and also working here in the United States. So I think that is the connection, and we should remember that. I think this, the whole process, the working with that, I think that gave the maturity, political maturity, and also the effectiveness of working together in the civic arena. That, I think, American Muslim community, they got the experience, and I am hoping that they will go to the next level, inshallah, working together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Bukhari, for a wonderful review of American Muslim activism and how the crisis in Bosnia has sparked the advocacy of Muslims and got them to be more active in public life and in civil activities. Now I want to go back to the questions here for our speakers who would like the chance to speak with. And I would like to ask Ambassador, I call him Ambassador Robert Hunter because of the significant role that he played under that title. Based on your experience dealing with the NATO allies at the time, and how would you characterize NATO today? Unfortunately, most of the Muslim countries, Arabs and non-Arabs, whether in Kashmir, whether in India, whether in China, whether in Libya, whether in Yemen, whether in Syria, whether in Iraq, are the ones who are under the, unfortunately, incomplete disaster. How would you characterize NATO and the European countries in taking steps to avoid what we always thought, never again a Holocaust to be happening, or never again that we will see tragedy for people, especially we are now in the 21st century? And I would like to hear your perspective on this.
Very important question, a difficult one to answer. Right now, many European countries and the European Union as a whole are roiled with problems of their own. They're facing problems of migration. They're facing problems of pandemic. They're facing problems of economics. And I don't think they're paying attention to the kinds of things that you've raised. In particular, I think there is a concern, however, on the part of the Europeans, not to see conflicts in the Middle East escalated. I think most European countries, and there are a couple of exceptions like Britain, who don't want to see continued support for what Saudi Arabia is doing in Yemen, who don't want to see a new conflict in the region, including with Iran. But I fear that when it comes to what's going on in Libya, there's not a lot of attention being paid. Turkey's about the only country that is paying attention. And the European Union has finally decided, of course, they're not going to admit Turkey to the European Union. And we have to recognize, and part of that has been because it's a large Muslim country and people think it'd be overwhelming. I think the good news, however, is that there seems to be a widespread acceptance in much, if not, I won't say all of Europe, of the Muslims who are inherent and indigenous to Europe itself. With regard to Bosniaks, for example, where there was a history already of a lot of people from Bosnia-Herzegovina who were living and working in other European countries for a long time. So I don't think that that is a particular problem. Albanians seem to be, to a great extent, accepted. People from Kosovo seem to be accepted. But in terms of getting the Europeans to pay attention outside of these immediate areas, I really don't see right now a lot of concern, including with regard to the Uyghurs in China. I haven't heard any Europeans speaking up on their behalf. You hear more from the United States. I was glad to hear before, and I'm going to need to conclude on that because I have another appointment, unfortunately, to go to. I neglected to say, but I was glad to be reminded that the Muslim community in the United States played an instrumental role in what the United States eventually did. In fact, the idea of lifting the embargo on arms supply, which was done by the United States Congress, was to a great extent because of moral responsibility. It was not a matter of should America go and fight, but should America prevent other people from defending themselves? Now, another thing that we are facing right now here in the United States, which those of you who live here will know this far better than I am, is to stop the stigmatization of Muslims in our society. I think we've made a lot of progress. Despite the fact that we have a president who's not been helpful. Dr. Mustapha says he hopes Mr. Biden will become president. I hope you'll vote early and vote often. If you're from Chicago, you have a tradition of voting as often as you can, because I think things will change then. But I'm afraid our president has, at times, used issues of Muslims in a highly negative sense. And we've got to get beyond that. The fact is, for anybody who pays attention in this country, the Muslim American community has played an extraordinarily instrumental role in the development of our country in a whole host of areas. Entrepreneurs, doctors, lawyers. During the current pandemic, I think if you look at the names of doctors and nurses who appear on television, that sort of thing, and the statistics, you'll find an awful lot of them happen to be Muslim Americans who are doing things for our society as fully engaged and integrated Americans. And I hope that's going to help for us to move beyond that, because it's absolutely ludicrous the kinds of things that some people are still doing to mischaracterize people of the Muslim faith. It's just on the different parts of Islam. Islam is truly an American religion and culture, if I may say so, if I may be so bold. Unfortunately, I'm now going to have to go to a prior appointment. It happens to be a wedding anniversary, then my wife and I need to go and celebrate that. But I want to thank you for the opportunity to be involved. And I salute you for all you're doing. You're making America
before you go, if I may say,
place. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you go, before you go, if I may say, Ambassador Han, please say hello to your wife and to all your friends there at the wedding ceremony. I'm very thankful to you for the remark on Mr. Holbrook. May God forgive him his sins. But let me say, he was not in an easy situation anyway. He wanted to keep the touch with the Milosevic, with the not to lose them, to influence them. And I think he believed deeply that the Serbian policy was wrong, and he was against that. But he tried to be tactical. And the mistake that he admitted before he died was that the mistake of the Republika Srpska by name, even by name. because they removed the name Republika Bosnia Herzegovina and they gave it to Serbian Karadzic to please him. He was flattering too much of Milosevic and the Karadzic and so on. So that's his mistake. But overall, he highlighted the case of Bosnia, and we know that he was against the use of NATO. We knew that, but we don't want to mention this because we want him to be a good guy in our case.
I just wished when I was trying to get the use of NATO forces to stop people from being killed in Bosnia, I just wish he'd been on the right side of the issue.
But we are very
I'm a charitable person. We have to be charitable.
We are very
nothing
happy
but good of
to,
the dead. All right.
And please, if you see again General Clark, please say him hello from me personally.
I shall do that.
And we are very glad that we have people like you, Ambassador.
Well, you're very kind, and I'm very glad
you are the deep state. You know, you are the deep state in the Bosnian case.
Now, from what you're telling me, you're an American citizen. Get out there and vote. Get out there. And vote.
Well, I wish I am trying to become one. So
okay, good.
So
go out and vote anyway.
We are trying because we are now part of your destiny, whether you like it or not.
There's no question.
Whether for good or for bad, you know.
Well, I thank you very much.
We are now part of your story, and you are here. You have the right. You have the right of Bosnia, and you have the duty of Bosnia. As we Bosnians are now feeling, whatever you do, we feel responsible for your actions anyway, even for your president. So
well,
don't forget that.
I look forward to my next visit to Sarajevo.
Please.
Bless you.
We will host
everybody.
You.
I must
host you here.
Take care.
I would also like to thank you, Dr. Hunter, and please extend our greetings to Shireen and congratulations for your anniversary. This is really nice of you that you took time to be with us tonight. But
I think those of you who know my family know that I married above myself, and I have a genuine expert who I happen to be married to for 40 years now, and I'm looking forward to the next 40. Bless you all. Good night.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, we have now questions for Dr. Mirsad. And you have given us the background on the history of Bosnians and their existence in Europe, and I think that was fascinating to know all of that. What do you think of the Bosnian today and tomorrow, knowing what the history was 25 years ago? Those who were born at that time, they are 25 years old today. And they are old enough to start shaping the future of Bosnia. So what do you think?
Well, brother, I think Dr. Ceric will probably be better. I am a political scientist, as my kids often refer to me, you're a cynical political scientist. So I tend to, and it's coming from a critical school, I tend to always see things, from somewhat not very optimistic perspective. I am very concerned, just like Dr. Ceric was, I'm very concerned of reluctance of United States to be involved in the Balkans. I hope that people paying attention that currently there are 3 or maybe 2 major issues are to be resolved there with Kosovo and with Montenegro, it remains to be seen how that will be resolved, because the resolution of Kosovo may actually have significant implications in Bosnia as well. So I hope that we will get proper attention by United States, and the United States will carry its high moral role that it played before. Germany was tried, European Union tried, but European Union is, I'm not a big fan of Europeans. European Union is mostly oriented toward itself, and although there are positive players, certainly like Germany, right? I don't know whether they have energy and strength to resolve the Balkan problems. So I'm a little bit pessimistic because looks like the current administration is not fully engaged, which is really surprising because the first lady is from Slovenia. It's from Yugoslavia. So, which again, many people may not know, but first lady is from the region. And I assume that if anybody she knows, you know, to some extent, because she was old enough to remember the dissolution of Yugoslav war, she knows how that was played. But realism of people surrounding the president, not a realism in the sense of theoretical realism, but realism in sense of, you know, bottom line, may be inclined to make deals which may not be good for Bosnian Muslims. And I hope Bosnian Muslims are paying attention. What I said in my introduction, I said that hopefully we have learned that we not rely and, you know, place our destiny in the hands of anybody.
Thank you. Probably, maybe it's better not to get involved in this current administration. Otherwise, it could get worse. I see the hands of Brother Talat Atman for a question. So, Brother Talat, if you have a questions, go ahead, please.
I know you want to wrap things up, but Brother Sam, and I just want to say I commend you and ICNA for having put together this outstanding panel. That is very, very informative and very helpful. I want to say to Dr. Mirsad, we do have in Chicago, as you know, a strong still Bosnian community, sometimes fragmented, but very strong. And I've been involved with them since the 60s, so way, way back. And I do live sometimes in Iowa as well as Chicago, and I'm aware of that young lady that was running for Congress. And so there's a very good community out there as well. And for Dr. Mustapha, I just want to tell your brother, I am a Democrat now for the last 15 years. So you may be happy to know that.
Well, I'm enjoying you now. That's good. I am glad that you changed your party. Very good. Very
yes,
good.
I saw that the Republican Party was moving to the deep end. Yes, and it was heading in a direction that it was no longer a Republican Party. And I think today, as we see it, I made the right decision. And wassalamu alaikum, Dr. Mustapha, and all of you. Thank you very much.
Alaikum salam, my brother Talat.
Brother Osama, I think that question that Dr. Misbahi pointed in a chat, maybe Dr. Ceric can answer it. That's a very important question to be addressed.
Dr. Mustapha, would you like to address this question? You know, as long as you are willing to stay with us, that would be our pleasure. I'm just trying not to put too much burden on you. It's going to be always sun rising soon on your end. But please go ahead, address this question if you would like to.
So give me a chance to speak to you because in half an hour I have to pray my Salat al-Fajr.
Sure, that's
that's good. So I will earn more. I will earn more. Not to oversleep. Not to oversleep. Thank you very much. Well, let me say that I am really impressed by my brother Mirsad of his presentation, and as long as we have people like him in United States, I am optimistic despite all this. So, you know, وَلَا تَقْنَطُوا بِرَحْمَةِ اللَّهِ. You should not be pessimistic, but I allow you, Mirsad, to be pessimistic and to be cynical, as your children tell you, because we need such people, and especially who are at the distance, because we don't know that Earth is moving around itself until we get out of the Earth. So you see Bosnia better than we do, and you can analyze. But we are now inside of Bosnia, and I just want to give you a good news. Don't worry. We are now less in biologically. You know, they killed for a nation that is 3 million or so before the war, to know that 8,000, or as we calculate, it is more than 200,000 people that were killed or missing or something. For a small nation and population in Bosnia, this is a huge loss. But on the other hand, before the war or before genocide, we were biologically a bigger number, but psychologically and mentally, we were not aware of our even religion and nationality and the state and so on. So what these Serb policies or politics made of us, they made us stronger. They made us more aware, more vigilant. We are now a self-aware nation of we are. You see, did you listen to my brother Mirsad? You could not listen and you could not hear such a speech, let's say before 25 years. So I now understand that when you are speaking with you know, Ibn Tufail remarked to Ibn Bajah when he said that Sufism or the Kashf doesn't have the sense, no taste, no dhawq, Sufi. So Ibn Tufail said to him, you cannot talk about what you didn't taste. So the same thing we can apply here. You cannot talk about things like genocide and to have a feeling, to have the sense of it, if you didn't experience it. This is why Jewish communities were alarmed. Not probably because of us, because they didn't know, they have no feeling toward us. But some pictures that they saw in our picture themselves. So why? Because this memory that they have is very scaring for them. So now we in Bosnia, whenever we see, like in Syria and what is happening in Libya and all over the Middle East, this is very scary for us, because we see the signs of that not only, but Rohingya Muslims and Uyghur Muslims and Kashmir, you know, this Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan recently, and he spoke, by the way, in Potocari this year, where he mentioned Kashmir, and he said that we are afraid that 8 million, not 8,000 people in Kashmir are at risk of genocide and so on. So let me then just conclude and by saying and thank to ICNA and you Muslim. You know, you have to understand Muslims in America. You are in the best position to clarify many things of Islam and Muslims, not only for yourself in the United States, but for the whole Ummah. So please, don't be lazy and don't divide themselves within the American, because I lived as an imam 5 years in Chicago, and I know this fight inside. So don't fight each other. Please unite and be strong. You have the best opportunity of the whole Muslim Ummah to clarify and to be free and to speak and to analyze and to understand and to influence the global politics regarding the Muslim issues. Therefore, regarding this question that we have here, I don't want to put myself all the time like I am in danger or I am somehow everybody hates me because I am Muslim. No, people love me. I think that people love me because I am Muslim, because I love myself. So everyone, every race, every religion, the Christians, they think also that they are discriminated. in many these Western countries and so on. So somehow everyone is now complaining about everybody. So I always say that if Martin Luther King came and said, I have a complaint, no one would listen to him. But he said, I have a dream. So we Muslims must stop complaining without reason. Of course, we have to bring our case and say how we feel about the world. But I don't think that it helps us just to complain, because those who don't like you, they like you to complain all the time and to somehow feel like you are not wanted. Of course, there are people who don't like me, but I don't like you. I don't like some people also. So we are humans, but and you don't need to like me. Why should you like me? You know, I love my wife and my children, and sometimes even with my wife, I have some, you know, some problems at the moment. So the question of love is the question of my heart. But please, what I see now, unfortunately, this so-called globalization is becoming deglobalization. And instead of strengthening international communities, in strengthening international organization, I see disarray. The only thing that God sent us is this corona that united us now, unfortunately. And we are united by this great temptation of corona. Now the whole world is united by pain of corona. And this invisible enemy united us in humanity. I'm sorry to say that, but that's the fact.
That's a fact.
Otherwise, you know, we are still, of course, I wish the corona finish soon and leave us alone. But we lost the mind. Why we lost the mind? Because we lost the heart. So we are now living in 21st century, not the crisis of the mind that we lived in 20th century, and the reason. No, we use the reason to the most extreme, and the reason is tired now, but we neglected the heart. And now we have to come back to the basics of heart, which meaning that the crisis is in our heart, because people stop loving each other. They cannot even share the same room in one. And some people prefer dogs to live with instead of living with human beings. So that's the message that we as Muslims, I think, should carry by our faith and our confidence. Anyway, my dear brother Usama and my dear brother Talat, which I like him a lot, and my dear brother Mirsad, I like him. I envy him because he's in Florida on the one hand, but on the other hand, I am lucky that I'm not in Florida at the moment. Probably in Iran. When Corona is finished, I will like to come to. Please say hello to my Bosniak fellow all of United States. Please keep distance and don't engage in social gathering, which is dangerous for you. Take care of your family, of your kids, and of your studies. This is very good. I am really impressed. I am not flattering you. And really, I enjoyed it and I learned from you, this of your presentation. And to my brother Zahi Bukhari, please say hello to my brothers from subcontinent. I am the student of Fazur Rahman. I know.
We know that.
I am the product of his mind. Even though I did not agree with him in all points, but I am really grateful to him. He made me intellectually what I am. And to Pakistan, somebody wrote here, yes, indeed, Pakistan did make a major contribution for our salvation here. This is not time to speak about, but Pakistan, we love Pakistan, we are proud of Pakistan, and you should be proud of yourself. So please make more of these conferences. I like to see you, and my final message is, God has blessed you to live in America and to make difference for us all. And I know that as Ambassador Hunter pointed out, all the best doctors that we have in our Ummah are in United States, and the greatest minds that we have. Why? Because we in major Muslim countries don't know how to use these minds. And so these minds have to go where they are appreciated. And still, I hope that United States will remain the beacon of freedom and democracy and human rights. And of course, I am with those who say the Black lives matter. So yes, we understand, but the United States will overcome, and we shall overcome all the difficulties with God's help. So may God bless you, and may God give you all, and please convey my salams to all Muslims in United States. And please send your children to universities.
Yes. I think one brother from the Bosnian mosque in the ICC would like to say something. Brother Muhammad Dabusa, if you remember him. Brother Muhammad.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
It's wonderful to see you, Dr. Mustapha. We miss you here at the Islamic Cultural Center of Greater Chicago. I just would like to convey to you that Alhamdulillah, we are united and we miss you. And I would like to thank Brother Usama and the ICNA for arranging this wonderful Zoom meeting. And it was great to hear and listen to all of you. So God bless you. And we let you go to do your Fajr prayer, inshallah.
I'm traveling as well. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Mustapha. We are very grateful for your time, your contribution, your discussion with us here. We look forward to have you visit back United States and be back in Chicago, and we take you on a tour in the U.S. Alhamdulillah, by the blessings of Allah, we do have the U.S. Council of Muslim Organization bringing all the major national, regional, and even local Muslim organizations together, and we will continue to grow. Alhamdulillah, we have a great leadership who believe in this unity. Maybe there's a disarray in the Muslim world, but at least there is hope and unity among the Muslim community in America. Thank you. May Allah bless you. Thanks to all our panelists here, those who were with us also from the audience, those who registered. Thank you for being with us. This video will be on our website, uscmo.org, or you can go to USCMO YouTube channel or TV channel. Will be soon. You just give us a time here to prepare the video. We'll be there, and you can view this entire conference online as well. Thank you all.
And Usama, Brother Usama, before you go, just to tell you, we, Bosnian and Lebanon, are very similar.
Yes.
You have the same. You have the state without the state or within the state. And
yes,
we do the same. So we can understand each other and we share. Thank you very much for your patience and for your idea, and may God bless you. Assalamu alaikum.
I also want to thank you, Brother Osama, for your amazing work. I know how hard you worked because
you've been very helpful
at midnight a few times, so it's quite a pleasant experience to interact with you, and thank you for putting it together. It was quite nice
for your help as well and your insight.
I'm also very, very honored. I was really feeling apprehensive about speaking in the front of Dr. Ceric and Dr. Hunter, because these are people that I very much respect and admire. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you all. All right. This comes to an end of our conference. Thank you all. Jazakumullah khair. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.